going to share a couple of client stories. Through my ongoing client, a college, I represented an arts professor specializing in music history. She had lived and worked in the U.S. for a decade, and she would have made for a fine NIW case if she didn't have a U.S. citizen fiancé. No issues. They were returning from summer travel, and she had a valid visa and a passport in her hand. At SFO, she was separated from her fiancé, spread eagle searched by an officer who announced she had a gun and knew how to use it, questioned for 8 hours, and finally denied readmission by CBP. She withdrew her application for admission. Luckily, she was not transferred to county jail. When she asked why is this happening to me, all CBP knew was instruction to deny entry from Washington. They went one better, and they defaced her passport so bad in canceling her visa that she was denied boarding on the $4,000 return flight she had to run. We never got an explanation for why her valid H-1B had been remotely revoked by Department of State, but based on the questioning, we theorized that it was because of a family member's pro-Palestinian views published on the internet. In any event, she was banished, away from her work, her partner, and her chosen home. Her employer was suddenly left with no one to teach class. Impressively, instead of terminating her, they stuck in there. They arranged for visiting professors, and for a whole semester she taught her students via video conferencing. I nagged CBP, being a CBP liaison, and filed FOIAs and records correction requests. She applied for a new visa. It went into that meaningless, familiar administrative processing, and then it was denied. We resubmitted and escalated. We tried congressional involvement, shaming Department of State for an international letter-writing campaign, and finally, so terrifyingly for her, the media. A year and a half later, visa reinstated. If that hadn't worked, had she been willing, I would have taken the time to outrage fellow guildies and come up with more strategies to keep up the fight. It took tremendous faith for her to override that experience and use that visa to travel. It could have been worse. She's British. She could have been Middle Eastern or Muslim. Speaking of which, about 80 Iranian engineers encountered that worst fate. They were all alumni of a preeminent engineering school in Iran, and their annual reunion and conference, held in a different country every year, had been scheduled in the U.S. They were coming to San Jose to attend a conference they organized to discuss what they all already knew about earthquakes. They all had valid visas, some issued just before their trip. Some had never traveled to the U.S. before and considered it a major voyage, and brought children and spouse in tow. Others had traveled to the U.S. without incident numerous times. The visas of about 80 of 110 of those conference attendees were also canceled remotely just before they landed at SFO. Bedlam. Without the same support network, and given that their nationality alone was reason enough, they had an even harsher experience. Many were transferred to county jail. They did not have pre-existing relationships with an immigration attorney, and this is where the local guild chapter's immigration committee, at that time headed by my domestic partner and now fiancé, Carl So this was just an amazing, crack team that was ready to do whatever it took. And it was, Nancy was involved, J.C. Shrikantaya running the Stanford Clinic, Stacy at BB Law, and Carl and I were all wondering what to do. We worked on FOIAs, we looked into whether there was any point to litigating. We did have a fine press conference, thanks to then Supervisor Ross McCreamy. But really, there wasn't that much you could do. They wanted to know why, again. We were never given a good reason, but they did all get emails after the fact inviting them to come to a U.S. consulate to have their visas canceled, because in issuing the visas, the Department of State was supposed to have consulted with other appropriate U.S. agencies to confirm that they did not pose a threat or to the safety or national security of the U.S. So several different embassies are approving 80 different visas after the usual interminable administrative processing. Forgot? I did learn through all this that export control can be applied even to B1s. And I know that for some of them, this was the one and only time they would attempt to come to the U.S. Due in part to the Guild's efforts, the Iranian engineers have a legacy at SFO, the Peacock Lounge. It's a long-term CBP holding area that avoids transfers to county jail. First in the nation. Those of you going on the SFO tours, you can ask to see it, it's very nice. On a more uplifting note, here's my last example of how the Guild's response network, it's truly, it can operate as a first responder kind of a system when the case involves immigrant rights. Through the Guild, Carl got a consult request from a U.S. citizen in Turkey. As he was also Iranian and had questions related to CBP, and I used to be an AOCBP liaison, he passed the consult to me. The client was touring Central Asia on a U.S. fellowship program to research food distribution. In the course of this research, he visited a couple U.S. embassies. As he had some remnants of family in Iran, he decided to add a side trip and visit for a couple weeks. The U.S. does not have exit control yet, but the Iranian government has for years. They wouldn't let him leave. So for about 3-4 months, government agents questioned him on his connections to the U.S. government and his willingness to work for them. Finally, still following him, they let him travel to Turkey. He wanted to get back home to California by Christmas and was worried that he might be detained on arrival as a potential spy, with his itinerary first landing him in Chicago. I contacted the NIJC in Chicago, got immediate callbacks, Carl called Avilan at ACLU, and we helped the client develop a more informed plan of action. Mark Vanderhout got involved. He got his people involved. We basically had a small army. Oh, sorry. So he decided to reroute his itinerary to a more attorney-receptive port in the circuit. He was ultimately admitted without any issues, and thankfully didn't need the safety net that we had woven, but to this day, I am awed by the immediate response from fellow guild members over the course of pre-Thanksgiving weekend. I hear some refer to the inner ALA within ALA as a close and supportive community of practitioners that know or trust each other. In the area of immigrants' rights work, I find that inner ALA in the guild. I've been shined up by sitting in your palm, and I thank you for the attention tonight, but my appreciation goes to the guild and the NIP for keeping this community going, and of course to my firm for the openness towards working headaches and messiness like this into our busy practice. So if you're not already a member, please join. If you don't want to join, please donate.